The 2024 Paris Olympics closing ceremony featured pre-taped performances from Snoop Dogg, dropping Drop It Like It's Hot, and then bringing out Dr. Dre to do their classic rap next episode in Long Beach, California. And then Billie Eilish also delivered Birds of a Feather, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers rendered Can't Stop. The stunts by Tom Cruise at the Stade de France, and having Simon Biles, the most decorated gymnast of all time, and the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, standing behind HER, her acronym for having everything revealed. The American Arabian singer Gabriela Sarmiento Wilson, while who sang the national anthem, during the handing over of hosting duties to Los Angeles for the 2028 Summer Olympics. So evidently the countdown to the early Summer Olympics in 2028 has begun, with the closing ceremony of the Summer Olympics in Paris. And it must be said that Nigeria, with 88 athletes to have about 12 billion or so spent, did not bring any medals, although we had Nigerians winning medals for other countries like Yemisi Ogunleye, who won gold medal for Germany, the shot put. Yemisi, of course, was born in Germany, and you have Salwa Abide Nasser, formerly known as Ebele Agbapun, who had to switch allegiance to Bahrain, winning silver in the women's 400 meters, and it's Echikuonke, who also switched allegiance to the United States, winning silver medal in the amateur event. I think incidentally, Annette had a no-show in the Tokyo Olympics because of her administrative lapses and on the Nigerian Olympic Committee. I think she wasn't registered for her event, then she couldn't participate in the last Olympics, and maybe that brought out some sort of angry sentiments in her, and she had to switch allegiance to the US. And today she's an Olympic medal winner for the United States. So it's another optimal use of your time with me on Homogate Radio Communications. I'm Abiodun Abari. I'm delighted to host this series on sports and the geopolitical economy. You're most welcome. Last time out, I discussed the risks, the coloration and the tendencies the geopolitical economy of sports is exposed to and influenced by. And primarily, I talked about how the nature, the expectations, and the outcomes of the internal politics of the United States impacts the geopolitical space. Yes, this importance is amplified by the United States being the co-host of the FIFA 2026 World Cup with Mexico and Canada, and Los Angeles hosting the Summer Olympics in 2028. And I presented a split screen of the Democratic and Republican presidential tickets alongside their vice presidential picks, and I asserted that they both deepen their bases instead of expanding them, with Kamala Harris avoiding Josh Shapiro, Jewish American, obviously having affiliation with the IDF, and also moderate Democrats, in favor of progressive Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Donald Trump, of course, shunning Florida Senator Marco Rubio in favor of Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Emphasize how markets react to the expectations or perceptions of the outcome of the election, reacting based on who is expected to win, which may be largely influenced by polling data. I also talked about some key expectations if hypothetically either side wins the White House race, not disregarding third-party candidates like RFK Jr., who's still trying to get on the ballots in some states. And more so with not quite a few Christians around the world feeling offended and going on to boycott the Paris 2024 Summer Olympics because of the controversial display at the opening ceremony. It's important to know that the Harris Awards ticket is a liberal ticket, and that will likely pander to the far left and progressive ideals, like Medicare for all and of course advancement of liberal values. So talk about the big government impact on taxes and debts. And U.S. debt hitting $35 trillion and counting. And we always have the big argument against that big government that taxes being transferred to cost of living, leading to inflation and socio-economic meltdown, as it were. So, and with the Trump's tax cut set to expire next year, the Harris-Walz administration willing to renew the tax cuts? No, that's most unlikely. So, and of course, talking about liberal values, Walz signed legislation putting tampons in boys' bathrooms in Minnesota and approving gender-affirming care for children, puberty blockers, gender reconstruction surgery, sex reassignment surgery, and related procedures, without their parents' consent. So, and of course, you see liberal values reflecting in sports administration and even the controversy of biological men participating in women's sports too. Yeah. And I also leaned into that controversy of the two boxers eventually won gold at the just concluded the Olympics. Algeria's Iman Khalif and Taiwan's Lin Yuting, despite being disqualified by the International Boxing Association after allegedly failing gender eligibility tests. Of course, a liberal administration will be more amenable to LGBTQ rights and create sanctuaries, so to speak. And I mentioned that a Trump presidency, we see more drilling of oil and gas by the U.S. and that will actually bring about a fall in global oil prices, okay, which might cause some adjustments in the geopolitical economy of sports, since Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and Qatar were depending on oil revenues for their sports ambitions, will be somewhat challenged financially. I might want to seek other options of financing if they are to retain or improve their level of ambition. Then I spoke about the exposures imposed by digitization, cyber attacks like the one of the TGV during the opening day of the opening ceremony in Paris Olympics, disrupting train services, okay, and of course the dangers and effects of criminal hacking and espionage. Give examples of Australia spying on England at the last FIFA Women's World Cup, and Canada, of course, spying on New Zealand at this year's Summer Olympics. Okay, and I told you that there are spywares that can be activated through WhatsApp messages, and they take over the camera and the microphone of the invaded device. So very important to make adequate investments and resourcefulness, ensure resourcefulness in the mitigation and safeguards, okay, of this as by employing the services of tested and trusted professionals. Right? Then we started our analysis of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which incidentally a lot has happened since in the last 1 week since I spoke on it, and Ukraine has since made an incursion inside the Kursk region of Russia, and this move could serve as a bargaining chip, when the time for talks comes, and which may be sooner than later, especially if Trump wins the election in November, or can also serve as a kind of something to force Russia to divert military resources from eastern Ukraine, where Russia has really made substantial territorial gains, and of course they also want to justify the support of Western backers in terms of military hardware funding and logistics, and of course intelligence. Okay, so was to show that yes, they are militarily worthy. So in starting out our analysis of how the Russia-Ukraine conflict is shaping the geopolitical economy of sports, last week I asserted that the Minsk agreement backed by the UN Security Council was just kicking the can down the road moment, and as even Angela Merkel, of the former German Chancellor, admitted that the intention was to buy Ukraine time to arm itself. Okay, so and the International Olympic Committee banning Russia from participating as a country in the Olympics also you look at the bans by UEFA and FIFA and other international sports governing bodies, and cancellation of Gazprom sponsorship of the UEFA Champions League and the relocation of the Champions League final from St. Petersburg. Also, some things some things noteworthy, in the scheme of things, and the events following up to Russia's invasion. So yes, and also mentioned Man United's termination of the Aeroflot deal and Roman Abramovich being forced to sell Chelsea by the UK government because of sanctions by the UK government. And in fact, a special window was opened by FIFA for players in Russia and Ukraine to be able to escape the conflicts and transfer to other clubs. And as a result, clubs in Russia and Ukraine lost a lot of money, with Shakhtar Donetsk, a club in Ukraine, seeking 50 million euros in damages from FIFA as a result. And of course, Russia has responded in various ways, sports-wise, apart from the boycott by most of the athletes who were approved to compete under a neutral flag. They cited, inhuman or unacceptable conditions imposed by the IOC. Russian TV channels too and streaming services also boycotted the Olympics, and I also mentioned that the old Soviet Union also boycotted the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, citing security concerns and chauvinistic sentiment and anti-Soviet sentiment being whipped up in the United States. Actually, it's my belief that the final medals table will have been different with Russia's participation as a country at this year's Summer Olympics in Paris, and of course Russia's elite athletes and coaches helped Chinese athletes prepare in some events, and China was able to tie the United States for the most gold, 40 apiece. Okay, so apart from the impact on the medals table, hundreds of athletes have been killed, and numerous sports facilities have been destroyed in this conflict. And the administration of sports itself is impacted by interstate conflicts, and sports has become highly targeted by violent and ideological non-state actors, who exploit the crowd and the visibility associated with sports to inflict their negative plans. All right. So, and over 200 people died and over 600 injured, in 74 terrorist attacks on sporting venues between 1970 and 2019. And Pakistan, noteworthy, a great cricket country, was stripped of its hosting rights of the 2011 Cricket World Cup. And even international cricket teams refused to play in Pakistan for 10 years after that 2009 incident, the attack on the Sri Lankan cricket team bus by about a dozen Afghan-based jihadists, group that's Lashkar and Jangvi gunmen. They opened fire on the Sri Lankan cricket team bus, and as a consequence, the national cricket teams refused to play in Pakistan for 10 years. All right. And of course, the Saudi Houthi examples too. The Houthis are a Yemeni group allegedly backed and financed by Iran. Okay, and Saudi Arabia is in Yemen militarily. So Houthis engage in cross-border attacks. And they actually fired intercepted missiles over Riyadh in March 2021 during the Formula E World Championships. And also they attacked an oil facility about 10 miles from the racetrack during the Formula 1 Grand Prix in Jeddah. So we need to really put the Russia-Ukraine conflict in proper perspective against the backdrop of the geopolitical economic concept as antithesis to globalization, where no state matters, and the U.S. hegemony, where only one state matters. and against the backdrop of imperialism and anti-imperialism, concepts we have dealt extensively with earlier on this series. Okay, so the U.S. hegemony itself derives from a sense of grand exceptionalism, all right, and this unrealistic sense of unparalleled superiority, a sense of being unique and better than the others, sense of specialness and self-importance. All right. So you reckon that right from the European founders, who saw themselves and their newfound colony as very unique and special, and you had that 19th century mantra of manifest destiny, finding it's providential, this destiny providential, and so from the outset of the United States, that grand sense of self-worth was pervasively imposed by the East Coast settlers of North America. Then, of course, the warfare and the bloodshed that followed, with them engaging the indigenous people at the time, all right, up right to the end of the 1890s, after dominating North America before seeking conquest abroad, and seeking conquest abroad actually, coincided with the declining power and influence of the Spanish Empire. So the U.S. was able to engage, in a war with it, and that was in 1898, and with the U.S. gaining colonies in the Caribbean and the Philippines, and this could categorically be said to be the advent of United States global domination. Then it must be said that after the First World War, there was some of weakness experienced by European powers at the time, as a result of depletion of human capital, military, and other resources, and this weakness was even aggravated by the economic depression of the 1920s and the 1930s. And with the Second World War in Europe, only the old Soviet Union could emerge with the United States and the bipolar world, as with the balance of power between the Soviet Union and the United States. Okay? But the sentiment of being the only superpower to run the world began publicly being expressed in the 1940s in the US, and the obvious alignment of the world along the superpowers was pervasive at the time. The world was divided into two during the Cold War. The Soviet communist ideology and the U.S. capitalist ideology, and of course there were nations who felt they were neutral. Okay, so we had the Cold War being characterized by nuclear arms race, proxy wars, and ideological wars, regime changes, and so on. And with the process of organization of the Soviet Union in 1991, the United States then assumed a status of complete sole superiority and grand exceptionalism. Okay, and sole superpower and all. And 1991, and at that time, China was not consequential in the scheme of things. So there was no nation on the surface of the earth that could challenge the powers and influence of the United States on the global stage. And it must be said that the powers and influence that the United States wielded from that time was enormous. And of course, this is an advancement of imperialism, and the developmental states are the ones just changed in the scheme of things, becoming more and more economically disadvantaged. Okay. So regime changes, concocted wars, and importantly the expansion of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So the United States also unilaterally abandoned the Nuclear Arms Treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Weapons Treaty in 2002, and of course the Nuclear Force Treaty in 2019. So it must be said that this somewhat American arrogance at its basis in the new conservative American thoughts, and of course the role of dominant oil companies in implementing U.S. strategic foreign policy is worthy of note. We look at incidents in Iraq, Syria, Libya. These are good examples. We'll still expand on this further in this series. So now, this neocon thoughts or way of life does not really engage. Okay, the U.S. action is to ignore all that debates, other narratives. The approach is to impose its own narrative. And it's repeated and reiterated by mainstream media, by think tanks, NGOs, academics, leaders of thoughts, and various proxies. So this is exemplified in the dominant narrative concerning how the Russian-Ukraine conflict started, or who the culprit is, concerning the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline. So a counter-narrative like that of legendary investigative journalist Simon Hirsch, saying it was the U.S. government that did it, is ignored, and from a kind of grandiose point of view. So what I mean is that the approach is not to engage the counter-narrative, but to simply ignore it. No debates, no engagement, no rebuttals, no assessment, just the ignore button. And that's the hallmark of the U.S. hegemony. A situation, as I discussed with you earlier in the series, we are only one state matters, and all of that are of no consequence. So this approach is just to proceed and succeed with its intentions, and not about cajoling or pandering to gain support for position, even if the position is hypocritical. And the case of the law on foreign agents in Georgia comes to mind here. Okay, where NGOs are required to state the source of their funding if they are receiving at least 20% of funding from foreign sources. Okay, so as a reaction, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced a suspension of aid to Georgia, stating that Georgia's actions were incompatible with NATO and EU membership. Even though the U.S. operates a stricter version of the law on its own soil. And even U.S. Senator John Shine asserted that Georgia is not interested in improving relations with the U.S. and chastising the Georgian government for alleging that the U.S. is planning a coup in Georgia. But, however, the Prime Minister Kobakidze believes that the reset of relations between Georgia and the U.S. requires justice and a correct and sensible approach. And, of course, reciprocity from Washington. So basically, it's a power game. This concept of brand self-exceptionalism, the U.S. hegemony, can really reach a place of delusion, as I illustrated using various examples earlier in the series. And it's just a natural reaction that anti-imperialism, hegemonic sentiments rise up in developmental states, so that they can use geopolitical engagements to improve their socio-economic realities. So it's an ongoing struggle, and more states are coming into their own as the multipolar landscape is emerging. The nations like Nigeria are struggling with to refine their own oil. Progress has been made by other nation states like China, Turkey, India, and of course Russia in altering the balance of power. So political realism reflects that we are already in a multipolar world, but the enduring approach of the U.S. in terms of this grand self-exceptionalism and that disparity in the thinking of the U.S. elite and the geopolitical reality, that gulf in thinking, that thinking of the U.S. elite and the reality of multipolarism, is the basis of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Okay, these I will further establish in our next episode. Alright, so in drawing the curtains of this episode, I would like to remind you that at Armogate, we are always ready to help and support your organizations to work optimally, creating frameworks and processes for optimization of resources and attainment of goals. You can contact us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram at Armogate. You can call us on +234 810 999 call 666. You can also visit our website at www.thearmogate.org. Our email is contact@thearmogate.org. Thank you for your time, and from my end, it's goodbye.